A spate of abductions in Nigeria is heightening tensions in the country. The 2014 kidnapping of 276 schoolgirls in Nigeria's Chibok community appeared to be an isolated case, but has now become a recurring horror in the country. In recent years, the abductions have been concentrated in the northwestern and central regions, where dozens of armed groups often target students, villagers and travelers for ransom. Earlier this month, however, the government stated that security forces should secure the hostages' release without a dime paid for ransom. So this week on the program, we examine why kidnapping is so rampant in Nigeria and look at what can be done to end the scourge. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. The numbers of reported kidnappings in the country are shocking. Nigerian risk consultancy SBM Intelligence says that it has recorded over 4,700 people abducted since May 2023. In some of the abductions reported last year, gunmen or armed groups abducted students from the University of Jos, the Federal University of Gusau in Zamfara State, the Federal University in Katsina, and Nasarawa State University. In March 2024, at least 3 mass kidnappings have been reported, involving hundreds of victims. On March the 7th, gunmen riding motorcycles kidnapped 287 students at the government secondary school in the Kaduna state town of Kuriga. The kidnappers demanded a total of 1 billion naira for their release. On March the 9th, armed men broke into a boarding school in Gidan Bakuso village in Sokoto state and seized 15 children as they slept. A woman was also abducted from the village. Over the weekend of March the 16th and the 17th, gunmen in Nigeria kidnapped around 100 people, including women and children, in 2 attacks in Kaduna State. Well, joining me now to unpack the worrying spate of kidnappings in Nigeria are from Abuja in Nigeria, Ubong Tommy, Head of Project Delivery at the Africa Youth Growth Foundation. From New York, Dennis Amakri, a former Director for Department of State Services, Nigeria Secret Service, and a security analyst. And also joining us from Abuja in Nigeria, David Otto, Certified Master Anti-Terrorism Specialist and NATO School Trainer. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Now, David, let me start off with you with some statistics coming out of Nigeria, because according to SBM Intelligence, that is an Abuja-based security consultancy, 4,777 people have been kidnapped throughout Nigeria since May of 2023. It does seem that there is a kidnapping crisis in Nigeria currently. What do you make of the recent abductions across parts of Nigeria?
Well, I think I've seen this report. It talks about that, but that's just the reported figures. I mean, the actual figures would definitely be more than 4,000. And this has happened for the past decade. I'm talking about the mass kidnapping that occurred in 2014 that involved the Chibok girls. Since then, we've had almost 20 different types of mass kidnappings. I mean, the Chibok girls was meant to be a never again mass kidnap, but as recently we've seen kidnappings continue, and I'm not just talking about mass kidnapping alone. We're talking about kidnapping of individuals right very at the heart of the Capital Territory, FCT. It tells us that the government and the security forces, have been asleep, and they've lost the ability and the capabilities to prevent these kidnappings from happening. But it also indicates the level of desperation that these so-called kidnappers and bandits are ready to go to carry out this level of kidnapping and then just disappear. I mean, it's quite unheard of for any country that 200 plus children will be taken away, whisked away in the middle of the night and just disappear into thin air. That demonstrates a huge gap within the security architecture, whether it's on the level of intelligence, in the level of prevention, in the level of response. So it's a big, massive issue that the government needs to deal with as we speak.
Dennis, tell us what is going on here since you've previously worked with the security services. Is the security apparatus overwhelmed, and who exactly is responsible for abducting Nigerians and why?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. We don't think that the security agencies don't have the capabilities. They have the capabilities to quell this thing if the political will is behind them. What I see personally is that there is a mixture of politics with security. And of course, most of these kidnappings are happening because of this particular mixture of politics and security. Otherwise, why should we have 200 girls like in 2014 when the Chibok girls were removed? 214, more than 200 girls were taken away, and we don't know how they actually went away. Were there long buses that was there to carry them? And of course, they have to go through the Sahel and then away until nobody could actually even locate them. In fact, there are some reports to say that they were taken and then hidden somewhere in Maiduguri for a while before they were actually moved gradually into the Sambisa forest. So there are people who are really assisting this kidnapping. The former president, President Jonathan, came out to say that there are terrorist supporters in his government. So they are playing politics, actually, and that's the way I think it is right now. If they are serious, I think it's easy to quell this in no time.
Ubong, I want to get your feeling here, though. I mean, who exactly is abducting Nigerians, and why are they being abducted?
Some people have reported, seeing people looking described as bandits, involved in kidnapping. Others, ascribe the kidnapping, to the deadly Boko Haram sect. While we seem to also hear a lot of kidnappings for money, because we've heard about even family members kidnapping their family members for money. It's quite lucrative, So, of course, there are a lot of social and economic reasons for these kidnappings. A lot of the people who kidnap believe that they have been, they have been sidelined by the government of the day. They believe that they have not benefited the way they ought to benefit, and they claim some kind of vulnerability or the other, while others are simply looking for a fast buck. No other business in Nigeria can give you that kind of fast money as quick as you get it through kidnapping. The success of a lot of them have, emboldened others, and I think that the financial fortunes that they've come to amass, in addition to being used to acquire more weapons to continue to perpetrate this act, but it has also emboldened a lot more others to come into this terrible act of kidnapping. The lack of deterrence also that is there is one of the things that has made them really feel bold to go out and make their fortune.
Right. So, David, I want to come back to you here on the question of why exactly the government seems unable to rein in the idea of kidnapping, whether it is for ransom or whether it is an insurgency. Do you think, or do you feel, as Dennis has mentioned there, that there is really a lack of a political will, that this is really about politics?
Well, I think, there are different dimensions as to why, this kind of audacious, activities would be happening. One of that would be that perhaps, the government, does not have the will to actually deal with this. But I think the other dimension is the fact that you need to have a strategy that works, not just in theory, but one that works in practice. And I'm talking about an implementation strategy that involves the the military, having some kind of a preventive role to play, having a deterrent role, having a role that is to do with response. But all that, can only function if they understand their threat dynamics within the environment. Who are these actors? What are they capable of doing? The kidnappings cut across the nation, and in terms of victims, it's not just children that are being kidnapped, women are being kidnapped, even military personnel, the police forces are also being kidnapped, but not just being kidnapped, but also being killed. If there is no coordination or political will, that has to come at some point, because no one is safe. And if no one is safe, then of course everybody is fair game, because success, is being seen as taking place as far as mass kidnapping and individual kidnappings are concerned in Nigeria.
Dennis, let's get a little bit of what the intelligence shows us here, because you have been involved in rescue missions. And when you track during a rescue operation, what do you find? And what exactly has been the success rate of rescuing victims?
Well, the success rate has been very, very slow over the years. Of course, suddenly there were some reports of successes where the military have to go in and even try to rescue. In fact, a couple of days ago, some of the people that were taken away from Kuriga were rescued and brought back, but not all of them. That means they must have dispersed them, because what they do is when they kidnap these people, they now distribute them all over the place, using them as a human shield. And then, of course, some of them are being sold into a very, very terrible new trade, human trafficking, that is existing across the Sahara Desert. And I like what the current president has done to say that no more payment of ransom. And that is good, because the ransom is being paid before, and they use it to buy more arms to kidnap more people.
Right. So, Ubong, we are seeing an upsurge in the last few weeks or in the last few months here. Were there fewer reported kidnappings in the last 2 years, or has there now been a rise in abductions? Is the problem getting worse, and why is that?
The problem has remained a tall order for the government, because it was something that we thought could never happen, and after it happened, we thought it would never happen again. The government, set up a safe school project that was meant to solve some of these problems. And so far, the reports are that only 15 billion, has been released for this. So I don't think that the government has matched its words with action, so much so as to be able to create safe environments for these children. And as long as that is not in place, this problem will continue to happen. So it is on the rise, because you continue to hear reported cases just between a very short time. It occurred in one state and then the other almost simultaneously. So that sends a picture. And the reason why must be because the success rate is high. Before, we used to hear people talk about ungoverned spaces, but now I think the kidnappers are bold enough to come into the governed spaces, to come into the center of the country itself and pick people from their homes, not just school children. They go to people's homes and pick them, And so until these measures, the measures that need to be put in place, begin to be put in place, like the other speaker had said, we will continue to have them because they are successful largely.
Ubong, the question here, though, is who exactly is paying the ransom? Is it the family? Is it the government? Who is paying these ransoms?
We've heard that the families have paid this ransom. We've heard of crowdfunding to pay ransom. That is communities coming together and putting money together to be able to get people out of captivity. We've heard of institutions, taking the responsibility of getting people out of captivity. So it's a mix of whatever needs to be done to pay the exorbitant ransoms that are being requested for by the kidnappers.
Indeed, an interesting discussion, but we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we'll take a look at possible solutions to the crisis. To stay with us. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Still with me, David Otto, Dennis Amakri, and Ubong Tommy. Before the break, we looked at the extent and impact of kidnappings in Nigeria. Let's now look at some possible solutions to the crisis. David, Ubong has mentioned about the payment of ransoms by communities, by families, by authorities. Payment for ransom was made illegal in Nigeria in 2022. But there are situations in which governments can and are known to have intervened for their citizens abroad and even gotten involved in negotiations where lives are concerned. Is this something governments should do at home when citizens have been kidnapped?
Well, I think there's a social contract that exists between the government and the people, and the government has the responsibility to protect. Where a citizen has been taken by a non-state actor, and in this case by someone who is demanding ransom, the assumption is that the government has failed to prevent that kidnapping from taking place. Now, it leaves the government with two options. One, to carry out the rescue operation, and of course, that has its risk. And then the other one is to negotiate, and negotiation could mean, perhaps, payment of ransom, or negotiate for any other, maybe any other end of agreement that, could be reached with whoever is the kidnapper. But it all depends, again, on what the kidnapper is asking for. Now, in most of the cases that we've seen, kidnappers have been asking for ransom. Now, it is now up to the government to make a decision, as that it is not paying for a ransom, to rescue the victims without hurt. Of course, on the government's part, they would say that there is an acceptable level of collateral. But if you are a victim, or you are the parent or relative or friend of a victim, what you want is that, they are released, safely and without harm. And this is why most families or their networks or their communities come up with this ransom. One, they know that, the government has refused to pay, and, they know that possibly these people will not be released. So from the government's point of view, I think that it's something which has to be looked into very carefully. If the government has failed to prevent these people from being taken, or children from being taken from school, that does not just impact on the families, it impacts on education, it impacts on the well-being of the citizens. So citizens become vulnerable to a community or society that they're supposed to live in. So it's all down to, the government can make that decision, we are not paying ransom, but the impact is that people voted for it to protect them. There is a social contract which it needs to observe.
Let's look at that social contract, Dennis, because successive governments have deployed soldiers and bombed suspected hideouts used by armed groups, but the kidnappings continue. So why exactly haven't these measures worked to date?
The fundamental objective of any government is to protect their citizens. And of course, when this kidnapping started, we suspected, in fact, I'm no more in service, but there was a time a group of the Chibok girls were released. And of course, it was even announced from some foreign media that the ransom was paid by the government. Now, you see, when they were kidnapping individuals, is one that families can run around, or like in recent cases that we've seen where there is crowdfunding and they go and put money together and pay and everything. But the kidnappers have changed their style. Right now, as it happened in Chibok, so is it happening in Kaduna and of course in Sokoto State, where they kidnap people in mass crowd kidnapping. And then, of course, they will ask for 1 trillion naira. Now, who is going to pay that kind of money? They know that these poor farmers are not going to pay that money because they don't have that kind of money. So who is the target? The target is government. And in many, many different situations, they have mentioned it, that their problem is with the government. It's not the people that they are kidnapping, but they are forcing the hand of government to make sure that they pay the ransom because of maybe some other primordial agreements that they must have had. And that's why I'm saying that security here is compounded because of the mixture of politics. Because when we research, or researchers have done many studies there to discover where these kidnappers actually came from. Some of them are not Nigerians, so they have to come out with exactly what is going on.
Ubong, let's look at the place of the local communities here. What exactly are the local communities and the NGO agencies doing to combat kidnappings? Are communities actively engaged here?
Many of the communities seem to be very concerned about what is actually going on, and a lot of the community leaders, seem to be in front of making their voices heard. A lot of NGOs are also speaking to the government concerning what is going on. What they expect is that the government will put every machinery in place to ensure that they improve security in most of these communities. What they also expect is that the National Assembly will go to work and begin to design legislation, that will ensure the strengthening of the police, that will ensure that kidnappers receive the punishment that they deserve, that will ensure that so many parts of the system and the structure begin to work properly. So that's what these communities expect, and they are crying, and trying to get their voices heard. And a platform like this is one of those platforms where we can hope that there'll be an uptake of some of these challenges and give a little bit of respite to the communities and the families of those that have been kidnapped.
So I want to get your final thoughts, and let me start off with you, Dennis. What do you think is the long-term solution to this problem?
I think we have to, as a country, Nigeria, to be able to face this kidnap problem face on. Because I have seen and, even interrogated kidnappers and interrogated hostages that have been released. And you find out the gaps whereby we are not serious. We are not handling it the way that it should be handled. It's like one-off. Anything that happens, we solve that problem and we go away and we wait for the next kidnap to happen. I think there should be a standard. In fact, we can start from a kidnap strategy, national kidnapping strategy for Nigeria. And then, of course, when you have that kind of strategy, you must have a standby response team, because that's what we lack seriously. A response team that will not make the kidnappers to be comfortable. Whenever there is a kidnap case, they should, within 15 minutes, call in the national response team, wherever they are, to arrive immediately, and then, of course, pursue these kidnappers to wherever they are going to. So I think we should keep them on their toes by being very, very serious all over the country.
Right. David, your thoughts?
Well, crime happens at the very local level. And Nigeria is well structured. It's got 774 local government areas. It's got wards. It's got 36 and 30 or 37 states, depending on where you stand, and the federal capital. What needs to be done is that, there has to be a coordination, and that must start with, I think, unclipping the wings of the traditional rulers, which has been constitutionally clipped. The emirs, the sultans, the igwes. These are the custodians of, what you call local security. These people need to begin to play a very key role. At this point in time in the country, you have a constitution that demands that a local government chairman, can make a decision as to where the sultan went and how he moves around, his particular area of operation. So I think the government needs to look into that. Besides, I think, again, I do agree with my colleague, Mr. Dennis, that there is a need for a new, counter-kidnapping, strategy within the country, one that involves understanding the threats within each 36 states, understanding the vulnerabilities within the state, but also being able to design a national intelligence estimate, one that would tell where or possibly where kidnappings will happen. These are patterns and trends, that we have observed throughout the time. So it's a comprehensive strategy. The country has the resources, it has the capabilities, but I think it needs to go down to the point whereby each one needs to work for the benefit of the state. See something, say something. That goes to the population. But for the people to respond to the cries of the government and to the cries of their colleagues, the government has to place them on a position whereby, they can freely give out this information.
Right. Ubong, you have the final word.
We must focus on the right kind of legislation. We also need to ensure that we're able to drive these legislations till they are actually giving the kind of attention they are supposed to give. We also want to look at localization. We believe that security should be local. We believe that policing should be local. We believe that the community, the security starts from the community, and we must ensure that community leaders are brought into the security architecture all over the country. And because most of this kidnapping takes place and the victims are taken to the forest, we need to explore the possibility of using more technology in addition to localizing policing, as well as getting the right form of legislature to drive the process of ridding Nigeria of kidnapping.
Indeed. Thank you all for participating in this discussion. But that's all we have time for on this edition of Talk Africa. A big thank you to my guests, Ubong Tommy, Head of Project Delivery at the Africa Youth Growth Foundation; Dennis Amakri, a former Director for Department of State Services, Nigeria's Secret Service, and a security analyst; and David Otto, Certified Master Anti-Terrorism Specialist and NATO School Trainer. Remember, you can be a part of this conversation online through our social media handles on Facebook and X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. You can also catch the show on our YouTube playlist. Do keep the conversation going and join us again next week for more Talk Africa. From me, Beatrice Marshall, and the team here in Nairobi, goodbye for now.